Evelyn was rightfully proud of her son. Tall, handsome, educated, a programmer at a local tech giant. Only 2 years had passed since the young man graduated from university, and he was already the head of his department. And he had achieved this all on his own. The talented young employee was noticed thanks to his professional success and promoted. Evelyn, upon hearing the news, cried with happiness. Everything had turned out just as she had dreamed, perhaps even better. Her son was earning good money, had a brand new foreign car from the showroom. Before we continue, I'd like to ask you to like this video, thank you. Stock up on sweets and enjoy the story. Evelyn had given it to him for graduation for his successful studies. She had to spend almost all her savings, but nothing was too much for her own child. And Julian bought the apartment himself, though with a mortgage, but it was spacious, new in the city center. Now her son was slowly renovating it, and for the time being, he was living with his mother. And Evelyn was very happy about this fact. Of course, she understood that Julian was already an adult. Soon he would become completely independent, get married, and he would have his own separate life. But for now, the woman was still enjoying her son's closeness. It was a joy for her to cook his favorite dishes and to iron his shirts in the evenings. When Julian returned from work, Evelyn would ask how his day had been, just like in the days when her son was still a schoolboy. True, in recent years, her son was clearly in no hurry to come home. He definitely had a girlfriend, but for some reason, Julian didn't want to introduce them. Apparently, the relationship wasn't too serious, and her son wasn't making any long-term plans with this lady, so he didn't want to worry his mother unnecessarily. Evelyn understood and accepted this. Every man should have some experience so that later, when he meets the one and only, he feels confident with her. Of course, Evelyn often thought about her future daughter-in-law. She dreamed of seeing a successful, well-mannered woman from a prosperous, wealthy family next to her son. Julian deserved the best, after all. He himself was a gift from fate. And Evelyn played no small part in her son becoming who he was. The woman realized this and was proud of herself. She had succeeded. She had done everything right. Evelyn had Julian late in life. She was just over 40 at the time. Before that, things just hadn't worked out. At first, young Evelyn devoted herself entirely to her studies. She didn't want to return to her native small town, to the limited opportunities and the crowd of younger brothers and sisters. She saw her studies at the university in the economics department, where she had been admitted thanks to her perseverance and hard work, as a chance for the life she had always dreamed of. And her efforts were not in vain. The dean himself wanted to help the promising young student. He arranged for her to work as an accountant at the local major corporation through his connections. It was impossible to get there just off the street. But Evelyn, now everything is in your hands. The professor had smiled at her then. Don't let me down. Of course, Evelyn did not let him down. She was ready to work day and night. And soon she was so immersed in all the nuances that even the chief accountant consulted with her before making an important decision. Evelyn was happy. A solid salary allowed her to stay in the city, rent a place, and not return to her hometown. Time passed. Evelyn was still passionate about her work. She constantly took some advanced training courses, read specialized literature. In a word, she was improving in her profession. The girl was not thinking about her personal life yet, although the pretty Evelyn regularly received hints and even open invitations for dates. But she realized it was too early for her to show these relationships, let alone a family. First, she needed to become financially independent. She had an atypical mindset for a girl of those years. All her peers at that time only dreamed of a successful marriage, while Evelyn thought only about work. Her efforts were not in vain. 10 years after university, she had saved up for an apartment on her own, without the help of her parents. And they, with all their desire, could not financially support their daughter. How happy Evelyn felt when she spent her first night in her own, not rented home. She was already over 30. An apartment, the position of chief accountant at a large enterprise, a stable high income. It was time to think about a family. And Evelyn finally turned her attention to the candidates for a husband. She had had short, non-committal affairs before. They were a break, a respite that allowed her to get away from her serious work. But now Evelyn needed something else. A serious relationship with the prospect of marriage and children. She had already delayed with heirs. In those years, women without children at her age were considered almost old maids. There were many men around Evelyn, quite worthy, smart, successful. But the trouble was that they all wore wedding rings. The best goods had already been snapped up. Those who did not plow like Evelyn for financial independence turned out to be more successful in this regard. But as they say, fate will find you even behind the stove. One day, Evelyn was returning home in a taxi. She had stayed late at work with a report. It was already late at night. At the wheel was a handsome, talkative young man, who looked about 5 years younger than Evelyn. It later turned out that he was 7 years younger. Vincent joked a lot, making the passenger laugh sincerely, gave her compliments, and somehow imperceptibly got Evelyn to open up. She told him everything about her life. Suddenly, the woman realized she was dreaming that the road to her house was long and would not end for a long time. It was so easy and pleasant to talk to the charming taxi driver. He too was clearly in no hurry to part, deliberately choosing detours. In the end, they exchanged phone numbers. Vincent called her the very next day, and it all started. Evelyn had never felt so desired and loved. It seemed that Vincent was charging her with his energy and love of life. Very soon, he moved into his beloved woman's apartment and did not hide his joy about it. It was cramped for him with his parents in their 2-bedroom apartment. And his sister had divorced her husband and returned to her parents' home with 3 children. Evelyn now flew to her apartment after work as if on wings. It was no longer empty and cold. Vincent was waiting for her there, always smiling, friendly, and very caring. The young man could cook a dish from the simplest and cheapest products that was no worse than a restaurant delicacy. And he also kept the rooms clean and always asked if Evelyn was hungry. No one had ever cared for a woman like that before. It all ended very ugly. It took Evelyn several years to understand that Vincent was just using her. If not for a chance, the woman would probably have been brushing off the alarming bells for a long time. Vincent did not work as a taxi driver for long after moving in with Evelyn. At first, he convinced the woman for a long time that the work of a taxi driver was hard and dangerous, that there were different kinds of clients. Then his taxi company closed down. Evelyn was even glad then. She wanted Vincent to find another, calmer job. The woman was afraid for her beloved, especially when he went out at night. And there was also jealousy. She had met Vincent at work. What if he met a beautiful young client and fell in love with her? No, Evelyn would not have survived that. Her feelings for Vincent were too strong. Vincent seemed to be looking for a job, studying ads, calling somewhere, going to interviews, but nothing worked out. It's okay, Evelyn would reassure her beloved. My salary is more than enough. You can take your time, look for a job calmly. And Vincent was not in a hurry. True, he sometimes took on some side jobs. He often had to go away at night, sometimes even for several days. After such trips, the young man looked happy, and it seemed to Evelyn that she understood his feelings. She herself liked to feel financially independent. She thought that her beloved was pleased with the opportunity to earn money. She was mistaken. One day, Evelyn went to a provincial town on a work-related audit. Vincent was on a side job at that time. He had warned her that he would not be back home for at least 2 days. After the audit, Evelyn was taken to a restaurant for dinner. And there, at a neighboring table, she saw this ugly scene. No, from the outside, the picture looked very nice. A young man was looking at the young lady sitting in front of him with loving eyes, stroking her hand, adjusting the girl's hair, and kissing her from time to time. A beautiful couple, pure feeling. The problem was that this young man was Vincent. He didn't notice her then. Evelyn was glad of that. First, she didn't want to make a scene in front of her colleagues. Second, she needed to gather her thoughts before a serious conversation. And also to somehow survive this betrayal, to vent her emotions at a moment when no one could see her. In her hotel room, Evelyn buried her face in a pillow and sobbed. It was painful and insulting, and also disgusting, just sickening to the soul. She had sincerely loved Vincent, made plans for a life together with him. She had even come up with names for their son and daughter that would go well with her beloved's last name. And now all these dreams were over. The scene she had witnessed put everything in its place. Of course, Evelyn understood that this was not normal. She was fully supporting a grown man who was in no hurry to look for a job. A period of temporary crisis lasting several months is normal. But Vincent had been firmly on her neck for a couple of years. And these supposed side jobs of his were a cover for such meetings with ladies on the side. He was probably deceiving them, presenting himself as a free and successful man, going to restaurants at her expense. Of course, Evelyn, as always, pulled herself together, gathered her courage, and kicked Vincent out of her apartment and her life. At first, he tried to justify himself, coming up with implausible explanations. Then he swore his love and begged for forgiveness. And only at the end, when it became clear that Evelyn was determined, Vincent said what was really on his mind. "And what did you expect? You're already old, I'm young. I'm drawn to the young and beautiful, the easygoing. And you're cold, domineering, unpleasant, and also fat. Who needs you?" And Vincent left, slamming the door. Evelyn thought about his words. Was it true? Was she really so vile? Perhaps that's why she couldn't get her relationships with the opposite sex right, while her peers were already taking their children to school. Evelyn was going through a difficult breakup at that time, and because of Vincent's behavior, she became disillusioned with all men. She no longer wanted to get married. But the woman did not give up hope of becoming a mother. Only now she planned to give birth for herself. Evelyn had periodic affairs. She started them exclusively for the purpose of procreation, but the child just didn't happen. She couldn't go to the doctor with her problem. At that time, it was considered immoral to plan a child while unmarried. And Evelyn decided that she was infertile and came to terms with it. She would not have a husband or a child in her life. At least she had her work, her only outlet. Then, after celebrating her 40th birthday, Evelyn finally met her fate. Anthony Peterson was divorced and the CEO of a partner company. At their very first meeting, he began to show obvious signs of attention to the chief accountant, gave her compliments, looked at her with admiring eyes, smiled, and one day asked her on a date. And so it began. Anthony was strikingly different from the gigolo Vincent. He invited Evelyn to expensive restaurants, gave her luxurious gifts, helped her with her work. The woman did not have such strong feelings for him as for Vincent. Passion, love, admiration. But in Anthony's presence, she felt desired and loved. It was calm and reliable with him. Therefore, Evelyn gladly agreed to Anthony's proposal to legitimize their relationship. They began to live in Anthony's apartment. Evelyn rented out her own 3-bedroom apartment. The woman honestly warned her future husband that she could not have children. She was sure of this because none of her attempts, and there were many, had been successful. But Anthony was not worried about this. He had already managed to become a father. His son and daughter were finishing university. The father communicated with them and helped them. That was enough for him. What was Evelyn's surprise when she discovered that she was pregnant? The woman still, almost a quarter of a century later, remembered the wave of warmth and happiness that had washed over her. A dream that seemed would never come true had finally become a reality. Anthony was also overjoyed. He was sure it was a son and even suggested naming him Julian, in honor of his grandfather. As it turned out later, Anthony was right. They did have a boy. But his father never saw him. Evelyn's personal happiness was short-lived. A sudden stroke took Anthony's life. A man in the prime of his life, who had just turned 45, was gone in a matter of hours. Evelyn took a long time to recover from her loss. She was helped to cope with her difficult feelings by the realization that a baby was living and developing inside her. For his sake, she had to be strong. The woman moved into her apartment. Anthony's adult children immediately laid claim to his property. Evelyn renounced her share of the inheritance in their favor. She considered it the right thing to do. Julian, who was born a little premature, tiny, sickly, and crying, pulled Evelyn out of her despondency. He took all of his mother's attention and all her strength. Evelyn had to spend a lot of money on doctors. Fortunately, she had it. The premature baby was found to have many problems. The diagnoses sounded different, including terrible ones, up to cerebral palsy in question. But Evelyn did not give up. She looked for outstanding rehabilitation specialists, studied medical news, got into the best treatment centers. And all this paid off. By school, Julian was not only completely healthy but also developed beyond his years. Medals for prizes in swimming hung above his bed. In the corner of the nursery stood a piano on which the preschooler could already play classical pieces quite tolerably. And the shelves were bursting with colorful children's books. Yes, Julian loved to read before first grade. His mother tried to instill this interest in him, and she succeeded. Of course, at school, Julian only got A's and continued to please his mother with his sports achievements. And in middle school, the boy became interested in programming. Evelyn supported this useful hobby, bought her son a powerful computer, some discs, and a whole bunch of other iron gadgets. Evelyn did not go into details, she just sponsored her enthusiastic child. And it was not in vain. Soon Julian began to win programming Olympiads. Evelyn's soul sang with happiness when the boy brought home another certificate. Even then, the woman realized her son would go far. He would achieve a lot. In all this was Evelyn's merit. Without knowing any doubts or rest, she was engaged with her son. First with his health, then with his development and upbringing. The woman took him to clubs and sections, traveled with him to competitions, and combined all this with a difficult job. It was hard for Evelyn without support. Sometimes she looked with longing at the fathers who walked with their children and took them to kindergarten or school. Anthony would have been a very attentive and caring father. Life with him would have been easier and more pleasant. But it turned out as it turned out. And now the woman was trying her best for her son for two. She wanted the boy to suffer as little as possible from the absence of a father in his life. Evelyn saw many pluses in late motherhood. Young mothers often snapped at their children or neglected them, building their careers, personal lives, meeting with friends, going to beauty salons. She, on the other hand, was well aware that a child is a priceless gift and spared no time or effort on her son's development. The result exceeded expectations. Her boy entered the university on his own, brilliantly passing the entrance exams, and studied there only with excellent marks. Until the fourth year. The fourth year. Evelyn shuddered as she remembered that time. Julian was as if replaced then. The boy got some friends. Evelyn was even glad at first. Julian spent almost all his time studying just like she once did. But he was a young man. He needed to have fun, communicate with his peers, fall in love. When if not now? The woman did not even object to his night outings. Her heart ached with fear. Her imagination painted terrible pictures. But Evelyn did not show her feelings. She understood that it was necessary. Gradually, it got to the point that Julian began to disappear almost every night in clubs, returning in the morning satisfied on staggering legs, stumbling to his bed, and collapsing on it right in his clothes. And Evelyn, who had been worrying all night, was getting ready for work. Yes, it was a difficult period. Of course, his studies suffered greatly. The dean of the faculty called Evelyn and warned that if all this continued, they would have to expel Julian. The woman was shocked. She tried to get through to her son, but he only snarled and was rude in response. The mother did not recognize her child. Julian had always been so polite, so understanding and considerate. And then he was almost swearing at her, and there was so much aggression in his words and movements. Julian was as if replaced. Evelyn tried to influence her son with money, simply cutting off his funding. She gave him money only for transportation to the university. But his nightclubbing continued. And soon the woman realized what her son was doing for fun. Several gold chains and rings were missing from her jewelry box. And then it turned out that her son had not passed his exams and had been expelled. This was too much. Evelyn had a showdown with Julian. He called her names, slammed the door, and disappeared for several weeks. The woman was beside herself during these days. She even filed a missing person report. But they treated her statement without due attention. They didn't even accept it until 3 days had passed since her son's disappearance. "He's a young man, he'll have his fun and come back," the investigator assured her. Evelyn then argued with the officer, accused him of indifference, threatened to complain to the prosecutor's office. But in the end, the man turned out to be right. Julian did indeed come back. He almost crawled home. He looked pale and ragged like a homeless person. Evelyn suspected that her son had problems with alcohol. He often couldn't stand steadily on his feet, talked nonsense, answered inappropriately. And this aggressive behavior of his was all due to the influence of the bad company her child had fallen into. One day, Evelyn discovered with horror that she was sometimes afraid of her own son. But just as many years ago, when she had to care for a premature, weak baby, the woman gathered her courage and decided to act. No, she would not give up. She would fight for her child again. This time, everything turned out to be more complicated. Julian refused to go to the doctor, to break ties with his new friends. "Don't you see, these friends are dragging you down?" the mother tried to get through to her son. "You were the most successful student in your year. You are a talented programmer. So much effort has been invested. And now you are ready to do this with your life? A little more, and there will be no way back. But with them I can be myself, not that perfect boy you invented for yourself," Julian retorted. "Finally, I'm free from your pressure. Accept it, and it will be easier." Evelyn argued, cried, begged, tried to talk to her son heart to heart, but nothing worked. It was painful and scary to watch what her own child was turning into. And there was also an oppressive feeling of guilt. It was she who had failed to raise her son. It was her oversight. She was a bad mother, just terrible. After about a year of such a life, everything suddenly returned to normal. It happened after another long absence of Julian's. His mother was already used to these absences. Evelyn had almost given up. But a miracle happened. Julian changed again. At first he began to go to nightclubs less often, then he stopped altogether. And Evelyn no longer saw her son in that strange state that had so frightened her. A year later, he was reinstated at the university. His past achievements helped. The teachers met the talented student halfway. And he even started working on the side again, creating websites for companies. Evelyn then decided that in his 4th year, her son had gone through a transitional period. Yes, usually growing up happens earlier in adolescence. But her boy had it this way. And after the crisis, he had grown up sharply, come to his senses, and now everything would be fine. There was her merit in this, of course. The educational conversations, apparently, were not in vain. Julian would snarl when his mother lectured him, but the right words were deposited somewhere in the back of his mind. And in the end, her son made the right choice. At first, Evelyn still looked at her son with alarm. She was afraid that everything would be repeated. But Julian behaved impeccably. One day, looking into his mother's worried eyes, he asked for forgiveness for his behavior. "I understand how much pain I caused you. I'm ashamed." Julian bowed his head. His whole appearance showed sincere remorse. "I insulted you, took your things, sold them just to get money for entertainment. And you did so much for me. And I treated you like that. What's done is done. It's all in the past." Evelyn hurried to reassure her son and relieve the awkwardness. "The main thing is that you realized everything, you've changed. This was an important life lesson for you. Now everything will be fine." "Yes, now everything will be fine, I promise. And the money for the jewelry I took, I will definitely return it to you. Even more." Julian kept his word. He graduated from the university with honors and got a good position at a prestigious company. Evelyn, who by that time had already retired, of course, had connections, but she didn't even have to use them. Julian himself coped perfectly with the task of finding a job. From his very first salary, his son bought his mother gold jewelry, even more expensive than what he had once taken from her jewelry box. He shyly handed Evelyn a couple of velvet boxes. The woman said nothing, just hugged her son tightly. She did not want there to be any tension between them. They were the closest and dearest people on earth. Time passed. Julian worked, bought an apartment, started renovating it. From time to time, he traveled with friends. His son and mother became accustomed to this fascinating activity. He often gave her interesting tours around the country, and sometimes he even traveled with her. And it seemed that there were no secrets between mother and son. They talked on a variety of topics, discussed everything in the world. And yet, Evelyn understood that Julian had a girlfriend about whom he was for some reason silent. The woman tried to ask questions, but her son answered evasively. And one day he said directly that everything has its time. And Evelyn left him alone. After all, an adult has a right to a personal life. And probably his relationship was not too serious, since he had not yet introduced the lady to his mother. There was another taboo topic for conversation. Her son never talked about what had happened to him during that difficult period, why he had suddenly changed, what kind of friends he had then, what the young man was doing at that time when he did not appear at home for days. And most importantly, how he managed to break out of the tightening swamp. Julian immediately became gloomy and withdrawn when Evelyn tried to talk him into it. And the woman gradually abandoned these attempts. The main thing was that everything was fine now. Evelyn was sitting in an armchair and embroidering. Recently, she had become interested in needlework. Turns out that it is very calming. And the result in the form of wonderful pictures is pleasing. A wall in the living room was already hung with them. Previously, all of Evelyn's time was taken up by her son and work. There was simply no energy left for such pleasant little things as needlework. The woman sincerely did not understand how one could spend time on some embroidery when there was so much to do. The television was on in the background. The action of another soap opera was unfolding on the screen. Not that Evelyn had fallen in love with these sentimental series. It's just that sometimes you want to watch something light, unburdensome. The years are probably taking their toll. After all, her 65th birthday is just around the corner. Soon, grandchildren will probably come along. Her peers' grandchildren are already finishing school. But she has yet to try on the pleasant role of a grandmother. The phone lying on the coffee table rang cheerfully. Evelyn glanced at the screen. Her son was calling. The woman was always glad to talk to her beloved child. "Hello, dear." "Hello, Mom. I have a request for you. Prepare something special for dinner. You're good at many things. Choose something the very best of it." "Of course, with pleasure. But can you be more specific? What exactly do you want?" "To your taste, Mom. And it's not for me. We're having guests today." "Guests? Have colleagues from another city come again? Should I prepare the bedroom for them to spend the night?" "No, Mom. Today is a very special occasion. I'm bringing my fiancé." "What?" Evelyn jumped up in her chair. "And why didn't you warn me earlier? I would have gone to great lengths. This is such a grandiose event. That's why I didn't warn you long ago, so you wouldn't worry, wouldn't imagine things. Just prepare one of your favorite dishes. And I'll buy wine." "That's enough, really." "No, it's not enough," Evelyn objected. "What about napkins to match the dishes and candles and decor? I want to meet your fiancé with dignity." "Mom, what candles?" Evelyn felt that her son was smiling. "Just set the table for 3, not for 2. Dahlia will be embarrassed by the excessive solemnity." "So her name is Dahlia," Evelyn said. She suddenly realized that this was the only thing she knew about the girl her son loved. "And who is she? How old is she? What does she do? Tell me something." "Everything at the meeting," Julian promised. "That will be a topic for conversation. You'll like her very much. She's sweet." The few hours before evening, Evelyn spent in pleasant chores. She still didn't laze around, went to the store for napkins to match the plates and candles. And she had to buy some things for the table. Evelyn baked a goose with apples in the oven. This dish was her specialty. She made mashed potatoes, chopped a couple of salads, and by the appointed time, she had beautifully served the table. Soon her son would come with Dahlia. She must be a very worthy and beautiful girl, since Julian chose her. I wonder who her parents are. This is important because a lot depends on the family. Will the girl like their apartment? Will she not consider the situation too simple? Evelyn's heart was pounding with joyful anticipation. Her son said that he would introduce her to his fiancée. Fiancé means they decided to get married. What happiness! After all, the time is not far off when Julian will give her grandchildren. Evelyn was already impatient to babysit the little ones. She believed that she would be just the perfect grandmother. The kind that neither she nor her son had. Caring, loving, attentive. And finally, the sound of a key turning in the lock was heard. Evelyn went into the hallway to greet the guests. Her son entered the apartment first. Behind him stood a young girl, thin, pale, embarrassed. In her hands was a simple imitation leather bag. On her feet were worn-out ballet flats from a discount store. Evelyn immediately noticed these details. They told her a lot. This was not the daughter-in-law she had dreamed of. Come in, dear guests. The woman found the strength to smile at the young people. She would talk to her son later. And in general, she needed to find out if their relationship was serious. Maybe there was nothing to worry about. Dahlia modestly sat down next to Julian. Evelyn sat across from her. A pretty girl, of course, gentle, so trembling like a doe. Julian looks even more masculine and strong next to her. The woman could well understand what attracted her son to this young creature. It turned out that Dahlia was a couple of years younger than Julian. After graduating from nursing school, she worked as a nurse in a private clinic. Evelyn thought, the profession is, of course, necessary and noble, but nursing school? Why not a university? Either she lacks ambition, or she's lazy, or she's not smart enough. Each option was so-so. She had been dating Julian for several years. They had met not banally, at a bus stop during the rain. In the age of internet dating, this story looked quite original and even romantic. Fate itself brought us together, Julian declared with exaggerated solemnity. And then he added seriously, Dahlia is my guardian angel, the love of my life. The girl smiled shyly, and Evelyn felt a pang of jealousy. Then Dahlia talked about her family. Evelyn had asked her about it. It turned out that the girl had come to the city to study from a small town. Her parents were poor. They had 4 other children besides Dahlia. During her studies, the girl lived in a dormitory and worked part-time, as her scholarship was not enough to live on. Then Dahlia received her diploma, not with honors. Evelyn specifically clarified this point and got a job. Life became easier. She had money for a rented place, some clothes and food. And later she accidentally met Julian and realized that she had fallen in love. Of course you fell in love, Evelyn thought to herself. Such a handsome man and also well off. You decided to set yourself up well at someone else's expense. The woman realized that her son was Dahlia's only chance to escape poverty. Perhaps it was Julian's success that attracted her. And what? A guy with an education and a good job, with an apartment and a car. An ideal option for such a provincial girl. Evelyn felt some dislike for Dahlia, despite the girl's modesty and good manners. She's pretending to please me, the woman decided. And after the wedding, she'll show her true colors. In order not to put her son in an uncomfortable position, Evelyn feigned goodwill. Julian looked in love and happy, but it was okay, she would talk to her son. He, with his strong feelings, didn't notice anything now. And Evelyn understood him. She herself had once been in such a position. Then, many years ago, the charming young taxi driver Vincent had also turned her head. And it took the woman several years to understand that he was shamelessly using her. She did not want such a scenario for Julian. After dinner, Julian walked Dahlia to a taxi. Evelyn found the strength to smile at her goodbye. But from the girl's face, she noticed that she had perfectly read the true emotions of her future mother-in-law. A sensitive person. But that was okay. The main thing was that her son didn't understand anything. Evelyn would talk to him, but carefully so as not to hurt or push him away. Let him see his Dahlia off for now. And in the meantime, she would choose the right words. Julian should not tie his life to a poor girl from a small town who doesn't even have a higher education. This was not the fate Evelyn had dreamed of for her successful, promising son. So, what do you think of Dahlia? Julian asked when he returned home. Isn't she just lovely? Lovely, yes. Evelyn did not argue. But, is it serious between you two? Yes, more serious than anything. I love her more than life. You can't imagine what a miracle she is. And we're getting married before the end of the year. I've decided. But, maybe you shouldn't rush things. You're dating, you're having fun, who's stopping you? But a wedding is a very serious thing. Mom, what's wrong? Julian blinked in confusion. You don't like Dahlia? What's wrong with her? She's a poor girl from a small town, Evelyn finally said frankly. She has no education, no prospects. You are her ticket to a comfortable life. I don't want you to be used. So that's what you think. You think I can only be loved for my car, my apartment, my salary? And I myself am nothing. What? I don't think that at all, Evelyn protested. You are the most wonderful. You deserve the best. And Dahlia, she's not your match. Don't rush. You'll find a bride worthy of you. Mom, what are you talking about? And I know what I'm talking about. I've learned from my own experience. I never told you, but there was a period in my life when a gigolo was living off me. It's painful and humiliating. Mom, Dahlia is not a gigolo. I know women like that are called something else. Don't talk about her like that, Julian asked calmly. And Evelyn immediately understood that if she continued in the same vein, she would lose her son's favor. He was too charmed by Dahlia right now. And remember yourself. You're also from a small town and also from a poor family. You and Dahlia have a lot in common. Not that much. I didn't try to improve my well-being at the expense of a rich husband. I achieved everything myself. Mom, okay, I'm sorry. The mother sighed. If you chose her, then she must be really good. You'll like her when you get to know her better. Julian finally smiled. You'll see. Dahlia is one of a kind. There's no one else like her. We'll see. And there was a wedding. Evelyn tried many times to dissuade her son. Sometimes directly, sometimes with hints, she conveyed her point of view to him. Don't rush, take a closer look, watch. But Julian remained adamant. He claimed that he loved Dahlia and that their feelings were time-tested. And he also asked his mother to be friendly with his fiancée. And Evelyn tried very hard not to show her dislike. But sometimes she just couldn't help herself. And why didn't you get a higher education? The future mother-in-law once asked Dahlia. This question had been bothering her. Her acquaintances already knew that her son was preparing for a wedding, and of course, they asked about the bride. Evelyn was somehow embarrassed to answer their questions. And now she wanted to put Dahlia in the same uncomfortable position. I had to work, the girl shrugged. After I graduated from nursing school, they asked me to leave the dormitory. So I had to work. You can't study by correspondence at a medical academy. It was impossible to combine my studies with work. Evelyn shook her head. And to herself, she thought that the girl was simply lazy. She herself had once worked from dawn to dusk, and had not expected to improve her financial situation at the expense of a rich guy. The newlyweds decided not to have a lavish wedding. They just had a small gathering of friends in a restaurant, and then they flew off to the sea for a vacation. And Evelyn didn't like this either. She had dreamed of a grand celebration. The bride in a white dress and veil, and her handsome son in an elegant suit. Relatives and friends from both sides. Cars decorated with ribbons and flowers, and a toastmaster. But it was not to be. Why should we water a crowd of guests, half of whom neither I nor Dahlia know? Julian was genuinely surprised when his mother tried to dissuade him. Was this Dahlia's decision? Evelyn pursed her lips. We made it together. We decided it was better to spend that money on a trip. Sun, white sand, turquoise warm water, and just the two of us. Isn't that great? So you don't want to see me at this celebration of life? The woman asked jealously. Come on, Mom. But a wedding is a celebration primarily for the newlyweds. We'll come to your place when we get back. And then we'll give you a grandson or a granddaughter. And if we're lucky, both at once. Grandchildren. Evelyn had been dreaming of them for a long time. But she didn't want to see Dahlia in the role of their mother at all. The woman just sighed. Julian and Dahlia got married as planned, had a vacation at the sea, and returned to Julian's apartment, which he had already managed to finish renovating. She came to everything new, everything ready, Evelyn lamented in a conversation with a friend. Lucky girl. Of course, her friend supported her. She probably seduced your boy on purpose. At first, the young couple often visited Evelyn. But then the visits became less frequent, and later they stopped altogether. Have you completely forgotten about me? The woman asked resentfully during a telephone conversation with her son. You're constantly picking on Dahlia, Julian explained. That's why we don't come. So as not to irritate you unnecessarily. Is she setting you against your mother? I'm sure of it. No one is setting me against anyone. It's a pity, Mom, but you probably need time to accept the situation. Understand, I love Dahlia. And I love you very much too. Don't make me rush between two fires. It's hard. Evelyn did indeed try to pick on Dahlia every time. The girl is not dressed right. She can't support a conversation on art and literature. She clinks her spoon too loudly against her cup when stirring sugar. She laughs terribly. Evelyn made these remarks in the form of kind advice. And Dahlia seemed not to be offended. At least she didn't show it. And then she probably told everything to her young husband. And she probably twisted it in such a way as to look like an innocent lamb. She had the advantage after all. She often remained alone with Julian, while Evelyn had not been able to have a quiet, private conversation with her son for a long time. With each passing day, Dahlia irritated her more and more. She pretends to be modest. What a quiet one. She snatched such a guy. She had enough brains for that. That's not like studying at an institute. Small-town girls and from a poor family, they are so grasping, so worldly wise and experienced. It was an easy task for the sly Dahlia to wrap her decent, intelligent son around her little finger. Evelyn did not absolve herself of responsibility. She should have talked to her son more often about such huntresses, and set him up for marriage with a worthy girl from a good family. This is so important. But it seemed to the woman that Julian was still too young. He had just graduated from university, started working. And then everything turned out like this. One day, Evelyn had a stomach ache, so severe that it became impossible to breathe from the pain. The woman called an ambulance. While it was on its way, the attack passed on its own. The doctor advised her not to delay and to have an ultrasound in the coming days. Evelyn called her clinic, but it turned out that there was a long queue for this procedure. They advised her to go to a good private clinic. The woman immediately found the addresses and phone numbers of several such institutions on the internet. In one of them, it was possible to have an ultrasound that very evening. Evelyn gladly made an appointment. At the appointed time, the woman was at the clinic. How strikingly different private hospitals are from state ones. Smiling staff, a friendly atmosphere, stylish interiors. No shabby walls, no cleaning ladies with dirty rags demanding you lift your feet, and no unpleasant smells. Evelyn was asked in an apologetic tone to wait 5 minutes. The woman sat down on a soft leather sofa and opened a magazine lying on the table. And then she suddenly heard a familiar voice. Come in, please. Mr. Peterson is already waiting for you. Dahlia was speaking with a smile to a patient. The girl looked very good in a white coat, which set off the beautiful golden hue of her skin. What a coincidence! It turned out that Evelyn had made an appointment at the clinic where her daughter-in-law worked. For some reason, the woman did not want Dahlia to notice her now. Evelyn quickly covered her face with the magazine. At the same time, she carefully watched the pretty young nurse. Dahlia exchanged a few words with a colleague at the reception, signed some documents, and then a doctor came out of the office, a handsome, stately man. And the way he looked at Dahlia, Evelyn did not like at all. The doctor did not take his frankly admiring gaze off the nurse. He clearly had strong feelings for her. The man asked Dahlia something, she answered, which made the doctor smile. Is she flirting? Evelyn could hardly breathe. How insulting for her son. He picked up a tramp and she's fooling around at work. The doctor came closer to Dahlia and again said something. His gaze left no doubt. The man was head over heels in love with the flirt. Just another victim of the small-town schemer. She won't stop. She just got married and is already looking for a better option. Dahlia answered briefly and hurried down the corridor. The man followed her with his eyes until she disappeared into one of the offices. The scene that Evelyn had just witnessed on the one hand shocked her. On the other hand, the woman was even glad. After all, she had been right about Dahlia. She was flirting at work with a doctor. Well, what a wife her Julian had chosen. Faithful, nothing to say. But how to tell her son about it? Any claims regarding his beloved little wife? He perceived with hostility and immediately interrupted his mother, not allowing her to say a word against Dahlia. The ultrasound, by the way, showed that everything was fine. Evelyn was, of course, pleased with the result. But she was now much more concerned with a completely different question. How to open her son's eyes. How to save her child from this greedy, unfaithful person. As a mother, she was obliged to do something. And right now, Evelyn dialed her son's number. He was still at work. How are things? The woman decided to start from afar. How's married life? Everything's great, her son answered. Are you sure? What a strange question. Of course I'm sure. I was at the clinic where your Dahlia works today. I had an ultrasound. Is everything okay with you? Yes, everything's fine. But that's not the point. You should have seen how one doctor was staring at her there. Just devouring her with his eyes. And what? My wife is a real beauty. It's normal for men to look at her. It even flatters me. I wouldn't be so happy in your place. Evelyn was no longer trying to choose her words. Dahlia was openly flirting with him, smiling at him. She can't be trusted. Mom. Julian's voice became firm. You're at it again. Dahlia is the only person I can trust. Our relationship has been tested by time. And me. Evelyn was taken aback. What about me? You can't trust me? You can trust her, but not your own mother. Lately, I'm not so sure about you, Julian admitted. You're somehow so fiercely against my happiness. Again this nasty Dahlia had come between her and her son. Inside Evelyn, everything was seething with a mixture of rage and frustration. But what could she do? Nothing. Life would put everything in its place. From that day on, she began to consider Dahlia not only a small-town huntress for a rich husband and a lazybones but also an unfaithful wife. And how could she not? Evelyn had eyes, and she had clearly seen her daughter-in-law flirting at work with a doctor. Of course, Julian himself would find out everything later and realize that his mother was right. A great disappointment and pain awaited her boy. Evelyn decided to celebrate her 65th birthday in a big way. The wedding hadn't worked out, and her soul demanded a grand feast. So the woman booked a large hall in a restaurant, paid for a luxurious dinner, and invited several dozen guests, former colleagues and friends. Of course, she also invited her son and daughter-in-law. Although but Dahlia she did not want to see at all. But then Julian would not have come. And in general, there was no need for unnecessary questions from the guests. The party was going great. The toastmaster entertained the guests with funny contests and jokes. The waiters promptly served delicious dishes. Evelyn would glance at her daughter-in-law. She had probably never been to such parties in her life. Let her see how normal people celebrate. Dahlia behaved quietly and very modestly. Seemed she was a little shy. This pleased Evelyn. Of course, the uncultured small-town girl was lost in polite society. That's what she deserved. It was now time for congratulations. The guests took turns standing up and saying kind words in honor of Evelyn. They praised her career achievements, her ability to be a friend, and her strong character. The woman melted with pleasure. It was nice that her loved ones noticed her virtues and appreciated them. And then it was her son's turn to make a toast. He stood up with Dahlia. Evelyn looked at Julian and was touched. What a handsome man. He looks like a Hollywood actor. And how well that jacket and lavender-colored shirt suit him. Julian said very touching words of his love for his mother, added that she had done so much for him, placed a small envelope with a gift on the tray that the toastmaster had brought up to him. And then he said something that made all the guests, including Evelyn, gasp in surprise. and our main gift you will receive in March, when you come to the hospital for the discharge." For a few seconds what was said was sinking in for those in the hall. Then there was a collective sigh. Then applause was heard, congratulations were poured out. People were smiling, someone even shed a tear. Dahlia shyly lowered her eyes. Julian encouragingly hugged her by the shoulders. And only Evelyn sat with a stone face. Unhappy thoughts were swirling in her head. In March. That means Dahlia is already about halfway through her term. That's why she's been wearing loose blouses lately, hiding her belly. And Julian didn't tell her anything. He's only saying it now, in front of all the guests. Instead of joy at the imminent arrival of a grandchild, which Evelyn had been dreaming of for so long, the woman felt an unpleasant feeling. It was hurtful and painful. It seemed that her son had written his mother out of his life. She had become a secondary character for him. And all because of whom? Because of a small-town flirt who, while pregnant, was flirting with doctors at work. Evelyn later regretted her actions. She explained it to herself as a state of shock after the news of the impending addition to the family, and the state after drinking. Of course, she shouldn't have blurted out her suspicions in front of everyone. It would have been better to share them with her son in private. But what's done is done. When everyone had calmed down a bit, Evelyn stood up from her seat and asked this question. "Julian, are you sure the child is yours?" At that moment, the scene from the clinic clearly stood before Evelyn's eyes. The doctor devouring her daughter-in-law with loving eyes, the charmingly smiling Dahlia in response. Sparks were clearly flying between the colleagues. What else could Evelyn think? The toastmaster tried to turn everything into a joke. To some extent she succeeded. The guests laughed. But her son? Julian's face seemed to turn to stone. Pain and disappointment were frozen in his eyes. He even turned pale. Dahlia at first flushed to the roots of her hair, then turned around and walked out of the hall, without looking back. Julian, giving his mother a sarcastic look, hurried after his wife. Evelyn clearly realized that now her son was really offended at her. And she herself already understood that she had been wrong to ask that question. The public did not need to know what was going on in her family. And Julian, how many people now knew that his wife was unfaithful to him? She had disgraced her son. The guests behaved as if nothing had happened. They had fun, sang songs, participated in contests. Everyone preferred to ignore the awkward moment, not to spoil the holiday. Only one of her friends supported Evelyn. Her son had recently divorced, and his wife had received half of the property to which she was not entitled. And now she did not allow her mother-in-law to see her grandchildren. "It's a pity I couldn't be as bold and direct as you in my time." Her friend shook her head, hugging Evelyn by the shoulders. "My son is offended," she drawled. "How can I make peace with him now? The truth is too unpleasant. It hurts the eyes. Don't worry. A son is a son. He will understand everything and will always forgive his mother." But Julian did not seem to be going to forgive Evelyn. She called her son several times, but he always rejected her calls. And then it seems he even blacklisted his mother's number. The woman for some reason did not dare to go to his home in person, although she, of course, had keys to Julian's apartment. 2 months passed. All this time, Evelyn could not find a place for herself. She missed her son, wanted to hear his dear voice, to see his beloved eyes. She missed their heart-to-heart conversations and walks together so much. The woman regretted that incident at her anniversary. Why bring dirty laundry out in public? But she had not changed her opinion of Dahlia. On the contrary, she was even more convinced that the child was not from Julian. She's afraid of being exposed. That's why she's preventing mother and son from communicating. Evelyn would have told him everything she had seen. He would have learned that her suspicions were not unfounded and would have doubted himself. But Julian had erected an invisible barrier around his, as yet small, family and did not let his mother behind it. Never. The closest and most beloved person. Evelyn had never felt such loneliness so acutely. It literally crushed her. The woman felt abandoned, needed by no one. It seemed that if some misfortune happened to her now, no one would even notice. One day, Julian came to his mother himself. Without a call, without a warning. He just opened the door with his key and walked into the hallway. As if nothing had happened, Evelyn was at that moment sitting with her needlework in front of the television. Another picture was turning out just wonderful. But the woman would have preferred to be embroidering patterns on a baby blanket now, preparing for the arrival of her grandchild, if she had been sure that it was really her son's child. The unexpected appearance of Julian both alarmed and delighted Evelyn. She jumped up, the embroidery fell right on the floor. Her son looked calm and determined, so grown up already, a real man. How she had missed him. "Julian, you've come!" the woman exclaimed, trying to hug her son, but he dodged. "Of course, Dahlia has done her work. Mom, we need to talk. Very seriously. About the incident at the anniversary? I regret it myself, really. But then maybe you'll come with me to our place now? You can ask Dahlia for forgiveness." "Dahlia?" Evelyn blinked in surprise. "I'm not to blame for anything before her. I wanted to ask your forgiveness. I should have told you the truth about your wife in private. You know, I saw her." "So you haven't understood anything?" Julian interrupted with bitterness, looking at his mother. "No, it's you who haven't understood. Caught her. Dahlia was flirting with a doctor. And that was Andrew, apparently, Dr. Andrew Peterson. So you're aware of what his name is? What, her lovers? Of course. What other lovers? Okay, my fault. I should have told you right away, as soon as I saw that you disliked Dahlia. But she stopped me, asked me not to worry you for nothing. And she didn't want to look like a holy savior in your eyes. She dreamed of a normal, even relationship. But since it's like this, what are you even talking about now? What didn't you tell me that was so important?" "Brew some tea," Julian suddenly asked, settling on the sofa. "We have a long conversation ahead of us. You have a lot to learn." Julian began his story from the moment when a new guy, Sebastian, was transferred to their group in his 4th year. Sebastian was not a good student, to put it mildly. He had barely managed to get reinstated after being expelled. His parents had pulled some strings. Accordingly, the guy was a couple of years older than his classmates. The well-mannered Julian was immediately attracted to Sebastian's free manner of communication. He could afford to crunch chips during a lecture, not reacting to the lecturer's remarks. And the guy often argued with the teachers, answered phone calls during lectures, could pack his things in the middle of a class and leave the auditorium. And of course he skipped a lot of classes. Sometimes he would disappear for weeks, and then he would show up, thin and somehow unkempt. Sebastian did not communicate much with his classmates. With his whole appearance, he demonstrated that they were too young and inexperienced to be friends with such a jaded guy as him. The impression was that Sebastian had a very interesting, eventful life. Someone was constantly calling him. From the snippets of conversation, it became clear that the guy regularly attended some parties, went to nightclubs, and traveled. Julian was a little envious of Sebastian. He even had a special walk, somehow free and uninhibited. Julian himself had lived his whole life strictly within the framework established by his mother. She had instilled in him that this is how well-mannered, decent people should behave. And Julian tried. But now, looking at Sebastian, he understood that one could live differently. What did Julian have? School, home, a part-time job on the internet, trips with his classmates to the movies or bowling, occasionally a date with shy girls who after a while began to act like unapproachable queens. Girls from good families, all cut from the same cloth. But he also had books, sometimes interesting ones. And that was all that made up Julian's gray, everyday life. Sebastian, it seemed, lived a fuller and brighter life. A real one, not the one that was imposed on him, but the one he chose for himself. Of course, Julian had seen troublemakers before. There were plenty of them in school, and there were some in the institute. But they were just clowns who were trying to attract attention with their behavior, since they couldn't do it any other way. But Sebastian was a different matter. The opinion of others seemed not to bother him at all. Against the background of this interesting life that he led, the university routine looked gray and insignificant. And Julian, at the age of 21, suddenly felt like a teenager. He felt that it was time to change something. He no longer wanted to live by the imposed rules. He was tired of dragging out the miserable existence of an exemplary student. His youth was passing, and nothing truly bright or interesting was happening to him. After university, work, then marriage, then children. This was the life scenario his mother had planned for him, and there was no place in it for entertainment, fun, or adventure. Soon Sebastian became a role model for Julian. The guy began to copy his manner of speech, his gestures. Sometimes it happened unconsciously. One day, Julian became so bold that he openly talked back to a teacher who had made a remark to him. The audience gasped in surprise. No one expected such behavior from an exemplary student. They had a very diligent group, the strongest in the course. Sebastian turned around and looked at Julian attentively. A clear interest flashed in his eyes. He even winked at the guy conspiratorially. And during the break, Sebastian approached Julian. "You're not so bad after all," he said, deliberately drawing out the words. "Not like the rest of this herd of sheep. They get humiliated, and they keep quiet." "I'm not one of them," Julian assured him, pleased with his idol's praise. "You must be fun to be around." Sebastian clapped his classmate on the shoulder. "Come to the Vesta nightclub tonight. My friends and I often hang out there." Of course, Julian showed up at the club in the evening. He really wanted to at least touch that fun life that his new classmate led. Sebastian acted as a guide to this wonderful unknown world. That same evening, his friends had invited Julian to the movies. A new film about Marvel heroes had just been released. "Maybe we'll meet some girls there," one of his classmates, a chubby, bespectacled guy named Evan, said dreamily. But Julian knew that he wouldn't get anywhere with this company. But with Sebastian, it was a completely different matter. Between the movies and the nightclub, the guy chose the latter without hesitation. And he did not regret it. Of course, Julian had been to such places before, not often, but still. To be honest, he didn't like nightclubs. It was dark, stuffy, smoky, the music was booming, it was crowded on the dance floor, and Julian didn't particularly like to dance, to be honest. The guy had come to the clubs a few times with friends to meet girls, but the ladies preferred other guys, just like Sebastian and his friends. Easygoing, relaxed, self-confident, bold, and decisive. And today Julian felt just like that. Sebastian and his company accepted the guy as one of their own. At first, everyone had a drink. Then they went out on the dance floor. Somehow, naturally, their company was joined by beautiful girls. In Sebastian's presence, Julian felt like a real macho. He didn't even have to think about what to say to his new acquaintances. Although usually communicating with the opposite sex was not easy for him, the words just flowed from him. The girls listened attentively, admired him, opened up. It was just magnificent. Towards morning, Julian felt exhausted. Sebastian and his friends also seemed to be getting tired. But then one of the guys took a small bag out of his jeans pocket. "This is to boost our energy," he said to the surprised Julian. The others needed no explanation. It was noticeable that this was not new to them. "Don't be afraid," Sebastian reassured him. "Herbal components, no chemicals. All natural product. We need to refuel a little. The evening is in full swing, and we're already exhausted. It's a shame." The guys all started chewing on pieces of dry grass. Julian followed their example. He realized that he was trying something and was worried about it, but he couldn't refuse in front of everyone now. It would even be not polite, perhaps. They had offered it to him from the heart, and he was hesitating. Not very manly. After a while, Julian felt an unprecedented surge of energy. He felt like a movie hero. Handsome, confident, muscular, capable of any feat. He could even climb the wall of a multi-story building. It seemed that anything was possible. Then his consciousness switched off. Julian woke up in some garage on an inflatable mattress. Next to him, covered with a blanket, lay a beautiful but apparently drunk acquaintance. Several other young men and women were also sleeping here, including Sebastian. Some on an old sofa, some on a mattress like Julian's, some just on the floor. How they got here, what had happened before that, Julian did not remember anything. His head was buzzing. Everything was spinning before his eyes. He felt nauseous. Yesterday had been good, very good and fun. It seemed that now was the time to pay. But Julian was ready to pay this price for a bright, unforgettable evening. "Oh, you're awake, bro," Sebastian drawled hoarsely, turning over to his other side. "Well, that's great. You passed out pretty hard yesterday. We even thought about calling an ambulance. But you're a tough guy, you pulled through." From then on, Julian began to hang out with Sebastian and his friends. It was a completely new, unparalleled experience. Julian now felt much more confident and had learned to be more relaxed. Many of the things that used to seem important now lost all meaning. For example, the dreams of a diploma with honors in graduate school. Previously, Julian was shy about meeting girls, did not know how to behave with them, was embarrassed in their presence. Now, in the company of Sebastian and his comrades, he easily made acquaintances for 1, maximum 2 evenings. The example of his new acquaintances and perhaps the drinks also played a role. And not just the drinks, by the way. Someone in the company always had something interesting. All this made the world brighter, the sensations sharper, the emotions more alive. Julian practically did not communicate with the friends of his past life anymore. What could they know about real fun? These losers were only interested in one thing on the eve of the new year: the upcoming exams. Julian, on the other hand, was infected with Sebastian's calmness, who didn't care about his studies at all. He had other, more interesting plans. Sebastian was planning a grand party at his parents' dacha. Of course, Julian was invited. The guy was eagerly awaiting the appointed day. The event promised to be not boring. The only thing that marred the fun was his mother. Or rather, her constant nagging and lamentations. Julian had not noticed before how stuffy and unpleasant she was. How her clucking irritated him. Sometimes he caught himself thinking that in order to interrupt the flow of tedious moralizing, he was ready to hit his own mother. And one day he almost did it. He raised his hand to her. A flash of fear, then surprise, appeared in her eyes. Julian's whole body was aching that day. His head hurt. The day before, he had had a good time at the club with his friends. One of them had brought something new. The effect was amazing. But in the morning, Julian felt like a crumbling wreck. And then his mother with her eternal advice. And he almost snapped. Another problem was money. Previously, Julian earned his own money by creating websites for various companies. And his mother was not stingy, she periodically gave him pocket money. The guy did not feel a lack of funds, although he was certainly not a major. But now he had neither the time, nor the strength, nor the desire for a side job. And his mother decisively cut off the money supply. She gave him strictly for transportation every day. You can't have much fun on such pennies. And Julian needed money. Fun is not cheap. One day, the guy still found a way out of a difficult situation. He had known since childhood that his mother hid a jewelry box with gold jewelry on the top shelf of the linen closet. There was everything there: bracelets, chains, and earrings. And also pendants, and even a watch. His mother loved jewelry. And it was into this treasury that Julian, without a twinge of conscience, put his hands. And soon, at the nearest pawn shop, he was already known by sight. Strangely enough, during that period, Julian did not feel any guilt for what he was doing. The main thing was to get money, which meant the continuation of a carefree life. Apparently, his brain had already begun to degrade. True, he did not realize it then and did not regret anything. Julian, of course, failed his exams. To be precise, he did not show up for a single exam, just like Sebastian. His mother found out about it, threw another tantrum, which finally pushed Julian over the edge. He again raised his hand to her, and probably would have hit her in the face if the woman had not dodged. Evelyn turned sharply pale, covered her face with her hands, and burst into tears. Julian saw his mother crying for the first time. But even this picture did not make him come to his senses. He waited until she went to the store and slipped into her room. The jewelry box was stored there. He still had time to get to the pawn shop before it closed. He needed money for the evening. He needed to relax, to relieve stress, to have fun. Everything around him was beginning to irritate him unbearably. But a surprise awaited the guy. His mother had discovered the loss of her jewelry and had hidden the box. Julian then turned the apartment upside down. He threw books off the shelves, shook things out of the drawers and dressers, even checked the kitchen cabinets. All in vain. The box was gone. In a rage, Julian smashed several plates and rushed out of the apartment, which was already beginning to seem like a prison to him. Julian went to Sebastian's garage. He was there, recovering from yesterday's party. He didn't look very good. Julian suspected that he himself didn't look much better. The guy told his friend about his problems. No money, it's impossible to be at home. His mother doesn't even let him breathe peacefully. What's the problem? You can stay here for a while, Sebastian suggested. This is my residence. The folks haven't been here in a long time. Stay as long as you want. As for the money, I have an idea. The idea turned out to be nothing more than a suggestion to break into the local grocery store. It closed at 7 in the evening, and an old grandfather guarded it. Sebastian would distract the guard. Julian, in the meantime, would deftly clean out the warehouse. Boxes of cereals, sausages, canned goods, drinks. All this flew into a huge checkered bag that the savvy classmate had provided the guy with. Then they took it all to some man's apartment. He counted out a few bills to the guys for their loot. Julian realized that Sebastian had done all this more than once. Well, okay, what's the difference? At least now they had money for the evening. And it was, by the way, already here. Julian lived in the garage for about a week. During this time, he drank a lot and did not feel well. He no longer liked his new life. But he could not return to his old one either. At some point, the guy completely lost touch with reality. And then he suddenly found himself at a bus stop, apparently somewhere on the edge of town. How did he get here? Without a penny in his pocket? Why was he shaking so badly and having trouble breathing? And most importantly, what now? He didn't even have the strength to think. So Julian just lay down on the bench and decided, whatever will be, will be. Morally, he was even ready for the worst, his own departure from life. Strangely enough, this scenario did not frighten him much. It was cold, it was raining with snow. A piercing wind was blowing. People had long been sitting at home. There was no one to wait for salvation from. And would anyone help a dirty, ragged, homeless person? And that's exactly how Julian looked now, and he was well aware of it. They'll think he got drunk and passed out. They'll just walk by. At least Julian would have done just that. And then a miracle happened. The guy couldn't explain what had happened otherwise. A beautiful young face suddenly bent over him, worried eyes and anxious voice. The girl looked so clean, so noble, especially against the background of the ladies with whom Sebastian had been spending his time in recent months. Are you all right? The stranger asked. Should I call an ambulance? Julian mumbled something unintelligible. The girl immediately pulled her phone out of her coat pocket and called an ambulance. While waiting for the doctors, the stranger measured Julian's pulse. Fear was reflected on her face. The guy concluded that his affairs were bad. And that was already clear from his condition. The whole world around was gradually fading. Only the face of this beautiful angel kept him from falling into oblivion. Despite the pain, nausea, and dizziness, he wanted to admire the girl's kind eyes. The ambulance arrived quickly. The guy was loaded into the car. All this time, the girl held his hand and said encouraging words. To Julian's great joy, she went with them. Joy. Turns out that even in such a state you can find a reason for it. The guy was revived by a miracle. The doctor who came on round stated directly, looking sternly at his patient, you should pray to this girl for the rest of your life. She saved your life. Another couple of minutes and that would have been it. A miracle. Julian nodded in agreement. It was still difficult for him to speak. Who should we inform about your whereabouts? The guy shook his head negatively. No, my mother must not know about all this. She just won't be able to take it. Julian understood this. She'll end up in intensive care with a heart attack herself. It's your right. You're an adult, so it's up to you to decide. And by the way, you probably won't survive another one like this. You were lucky this time you walked on the edge. You need to get treatment and urgently. Think about my words while you're lying here. You have time. Julian thought about it and refused. I'll handle it myself. I'll just be more careful about the amount of substances. Many people use them, I see it every day. But if you know the measure, nothing terrible will happen. Julian dreamed of getting out of the hospital as soon as possible to meet with Sebastian and the others. He missed the fun, the laughter, the carelessness. The hospital walls were oppressive, the procedures were tiring. By the way, none of his new friends had visited Julian in the hospital, although the guy had called Sebastian as soon as he could and told him where he was. He sympathized on the phone and said that, yes, it happens. He asked if anything not to name him and not to talk about the others. Instead of them, Dahlia came to Julian several times, the same girl from the bus stop. It turned out that she was also a nurse, which was why she was able to assess the guy's condition so quickly and accurately and call an ambulance, not just walk by. The first time, Dahlia visited Julian to find out how he was doing. She was afraid that they hadn't been able to save him. Finding out that everything was fine, the girl exhaled. It was noticeable that Dahlia felt relieved. That day they talked a lot. Somehow, imperceptibly, Julian told Dahlia everything that had been happening to him lately. The girl listened attentively, without interrupting. During his monologue, Julian realized how terrible his story sounded. He was ashamed of himself. He had dropped out of university, ruined his relationship with his mother, took her jewelry, and was hanging out with a bad crowd. The guy thought that after his words, Dahlia would get up and leave. Decent people should stay away from people like him. But to his surprise, the girl stayed with him for a long time that day, until the end of visiting hours. They were already talking about other things. It was very easy and pleasant to talk to Dahlia. Julian talked about his travels and admired her beautiful face, her slender figure, her charming smile. Dahlia came several more times. Apparently, she also liked talking to the guy. One day she told him about herself. It turned out that the girl had come to the city from a small town. She was from a very poor, large family. She always studied well, tried very hard. She had two dreams: to escape poverty and to help people. Both came true. Dahlia managed to graduate from college and now worked as a nurse, that is, she helped people every day. And her salary allowed her not to feel poor. Dahlia was proud that she supported herself and did not depend on anyone, although she did not live in luxury. Against the background of Dahlia's story, Julian's looked even more unsightly. A girl without any support, against all odds, overcoming difficulties, achieved her goals. She got an education, found a good job, learned to cope with everything herself. And him? His mother had always supported him in everything, just a hint. And Julian couldn't even finish university. The conversations with Dahlia made the guy think a lot. In the hospital, Julian reconsidered his views on life. The fun in the circle of Sebastian's friends no longer seemed so attractive to him. Dahlia herself, on the other hand, attracted Julian like a magnet. Every time it was time to part, the guy did not want to let her go. Seeing her bottomless cornflower blue eyes, hearing her voice, feeling her touch, it was real happiness. The most wonderful thing was that the girl felt similar sensations. Julian noticed this. She also wanted to stay with him a little longer. The guy was perplexed. What could such a pure, beautiful, noble girl find in a person like him? The first time she saw him, he was pathetic, hunched over, shuddering from a major tremor and vomiting. That creature certainly could not have caused anything but disgust. Then Dahlia took pity on him. Then she showed concern, came to the hospital to check on the young man's condition. And she probably saw something in him, something for which he could be loved. Julian himself had long felt disgust for himself. And then such a thing. After the hospital, Julian returned home. His mother never found out that he had spent a whole week in the hospital. She thought he was wandering somewhere, as often happened lately. He and Dahlia continued to meet and call each other. Communicating with her inspired him, made the guy feel better and cleaner. Julian was well aware that the pretty girl attracted male attention. The looks of passers-by during their walks eloquently testified to this. Even the head doctor of the clinic where the young nurse worked, Dr. Andrew Peterson, had asked Dahlia out. Julian had once seen this doctor when he was meeting the girl after work, and he realized that he had been in love with Dahlia for a long time. A successful young man with regular features and an athletic figure. Smart. But Dahlia chose him, Julian, a loser who had dropped out of almost his final year of university and had almost gone to the other world. It was nothing short of a miracle. Soon after Julian's discharge, Sebastian reappeared on the horizon. He suggested spending the evening at the club to celebrate his recovery, and Julian agreed. He had honestly tried to start a new life, but he was still drawn to his usual entertainment. He wanted to fall into a semi-oblivion again, to throw all his thoughts about all his problems and difficulties out of his head. The guy missed these sensations. In the midst of the fun, a call from Dahlia was heard. The girl seemed to feel that Julian was in danger. From the sounds, she realized where her beloved was and demanded that he leave there immediately. She called him to her place. Julian hesitated. He was having so much fun here, it would soon be even more interesting. He was sure that nothing terrible would happen. Why can't he have fun? Either you come to me now, or we'll never see each other again. Dahlia's voice sounded firm and resolute. There was no doubt she was serious. The girl had never given ultimatums or pressured him, but now she had put Julian before a choice. The guy looked around. The dancing crowd, the loud sounds, the cigarette smoke billowing. Then he thought of Dahlia, of her eyes, her gentle voice. Then a memory flashed in his head. Dr. Andrew Peterson, that same head doctor from Dahlia's work, was seeing the girl off with a sad look. And she, not noticing this, took the arm of Julian waiting for her on the porch and smiled at him. Julian blinked. The picture changed. Now he was lying at the bus stop, resigned to his own inevitable end. And a worried, beautiful face was bending over him. Her face. The guy called a taxi and went to Dahlia's. The choice was not difficult to make. The girl hugged Julian tightly, pressed herself against him. I was afraid it was too late, that I would lose you again, she confessed. I will never meet with them again, Julian replied, stroking his beloved's shiny light brown hair. I don't need anyone but you in this life. And the guy kept his promise. To all of Sebastian's or anyone from his company's suggestions to have a fun time, Julian had since replied with a categorical refusal. Soon his former friends left him alone, and Julian began to restore his ruined life. He returned to the university, took up his studies, and again began to work on the side, creating websites. He tried very hard to become independent as soon as possible, and to make his beloved a proposal. His mother could not get enough of her son, who had come to his senses. It seemed to her that he himself had realized his mistakes and made the right choice. Julian and Dahlia decided not to tell her about what had really happened. It was too terrible and ugly a story. Julian had decided not to introduce his mother to his mother yet. He wanted to present her already as his fiancée, not just a girl from the street. He felt that it was the right thing to do. And finally, 2 years after graduating from university, Julian realized that the material base was ready. He could start a family. And he proposed to Dahlia. It was not a surprise for her, but she was very happy. The only problem was the acquaintance with Julian's mother. The young people immediately realized that she did not like the future daughter-in-law. Evelyn, of course, tried to hide it. But to be honest, it didn't work out very well. Julian thought that everything would change after the wedding, but it only got worse. Dahlia pretended that everything was fine, that she was not at all upset by her mother-in-law's behavior. But Julian saw that his wife was having a very hard time with the whole situation. The man himself sincerely did not understand how anyone could not like Dahlia. She was perfect. Beautiful, kind, faithful, compassionate, brave. How could one not understand that it was a huge stroke of luck to meet such a unique person? Julian hoped that the news of a grandchild would change his mother's attitude towards his wife. That's why he didn't tell her about Dahlia's pregnancy right away. He was waiting for a solemn moment. The young wife doubted that it was a good idea to announce such news in public. But Julian assured her that it would have a greater effect. Of course, the man did not expect to hear such offensive words from his mother. She expressed doubts in front of the guests that the child was his. Julian looked in horror at Dahlia, who was standing with a look as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over her. His wife turned around and hurried out of the hall. Julian, of course, rushed after her. Dahlia needed his support now more than ever. That evening, the man comforted his upset wife for a long time, called himself a fool. Dahlia, after all, had been right. It was a mistake to tell about her pregnancy in front of everyone. He had thought he was making a beautiful surprise, the most expensive gift for his mother's anniversary, and it had turned out so ugly. From then on, the young people did not communicate with Evelyn. Julian was very offended at his mother, and did not even answer her calls. It was Dahlia who forced him to make peace with his own person. She said that otherwise he would never be happy and calm, and she did not want that for her beloved husband. And she added that a bad peace is better than a good quarrel. And then soon the baby will be born, Dahlia reminded, stroking her barely noticeable belly. Children should not grow up in an atmosphere of hostility. Evelyn sat as if struck by lightning. It turned out that she could have lost her son forever. He had been so close to leaving this world. The woman recalled Julian's behavior during that difficult period. Aggressive, alien, cold, deceitful. University and career did not interest him at all then. He did not even think about the future. The guy's only problem was getting money, and he found an easy way. He took most of his mother's gold jewelry to a pawnshop. Evelyn thought that the reason for all this was a dissolute lifestyle and youthful maximalism. But the matter was much more serious. He had almost died. Dahlia had saved him. Twice. The first time at the bus stop when she called an ambulance. The second time when she gave him an ultimatum. After the hospital, Julian could have returned to his former lifestyle. And he had almost returned. But Dahlia had stopped him. Her love, her faith in him. Evelyn took a deep breath. Burning tears came to her eyes. She was now experiencing a mixture of strong feelings. A belated fear for her son, guilt before the girl who had saved him, and a huge gratitude to her. Dahlia, what have I done? She probably won't forgive me now. Evelyn looked at Julian in confusion. It's obvious you don't know her, the man smiled. I've told you more than once, she's just wonderful, unique. I was lucky to meet her. Yes, Evelyn nodded. We were very lucky with her. If you like the story, subscribe to my channel and write in the comments how you like this story. Your support is very important to me and the channel. Stay with us, we will have even more interesting stories ahead. And you can also watch other interesting stories released on the channel.